Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on whether you're watching us live or if you're watching a recording. This is the 25th session of the second Global Stop Cyberbullying Telesummit. So that means that this being the 25th, there are still 10 sessions to go until October 31st, which will be the day that we'll have our last session. My name is Tito de Morais. I run an internet safety project from Portugal since 2016. I co-authored actually a book on cyberbullying with two other colleagues. The book was published in April 2016 in Portugal. It's Cyberbullying, a guide for parents and educators. I'm a co-author, so that means that I have two other authors with me. Sónia Seixas was supposed to be on this live, but unfortunately had the last minute issue and wasn't able to be here with us. And also Luís Fernandes, who usually is with me on the sessions that are held in Portuguese. Luís Fernandes and Sónia Seixas are also the authors of a book called Plan Bullying, How to Erase Bullying from School. This is in English. In Portuguese is Plano Bullying, Como Apagar o Bullying Escola. It's directed at teachers and schools and school communities at large. And they have also authored a second book named Say No to Bullying, Don't Let Them Hurt You. In Portuguese, Diz Não ao Bullying, Não Deixe que Te Façam Mal. And the duo became a trio when they were asked to write a book on cyberbullying, and they thought that my experience in online safety could be of help. Actually, we also co-authored a chapter on a book whose author will be here with us shortly. It's Bullying Perspectives, Practice and Insights. And the authors are Janice Richardson, who will be with us shortly, Elizabeth Milovidov, who was with us on the first edition of last year during the first of the Global Stop Cyberbullying Telesummit, and Roger Blemmeyer, whom I haven't had yet the pleasure to meet. But as I was saying today, we're going to have Janice Richardson. Janice is an Australian, French, and Luxembourgeoise, let's say. And she'll be talking about resilience, empathy, and self-esteem, and giving us the youth perspective. So welcome, Janice. How are you doing?
Hello everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and a little break from all of these lockdowns with COVID.
That's true. Well, Janice, I would like to start by thanking you for having accepted our invitation to be here with us. It's a pleasure. We had the pleasure to meet personally already a few times, and I followed your work since the times that you were at the European Schoolnet. But probably many of the people that are with us are not aware of who you are. So instead of reading your bio, can you give us a summary of who Janice Richardson is?
Yes, certainly. Well, first of all, Janice Richardson did her teacher training and became also a trainer for teachers in Australia way back in the 60s and 70s. Since then, I've continued my career in Europe, adding, of course, digital technology. What else in the 80s? End of 80s studying law, which gave me exactly the combination I think that we need when we're looking at these sort of issues. I'm actually author of 14 or 15 books, many articles, For 10 years, I ran the Safer Internet centers in 31 countries, and 2014 to 16 created a network called Enable, European Network Against Bullying in Learning and Leisure Environments. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about all of those experiences, but as you can guess, I'm also going to take the global perspective.
For sure. For sure. One of the things that to get to know you better.
What
is
are the things?
How come did you go and bullying and cyberbullying? How did you got your interested? What sparked your interested on the subject?
Well, first of all, it's not something that I thought about very much as a child, maybe because I was very sportive and quite a loner otherwise, and never at all thought about the concept. And then when people were talking to me about bullying and how important it is with children, I suddenly realized that I'd been very rude to someone throughout my whole primary school and secondary school education. She was rather large, and I called her Meg the Keg. Never believed that I'd done something bad. And that was a real awakening. How could I have known someone for 15 or 20 years, spent a lot of time with her, and yet been so hurtful, so rude? So I would say that that is really what initially sparked my interest, but also because I see so many approaches that I don't believe are successful, that I believe are having the opposite effect. And this has pushed me further and further, as education is my interest. And I believe that this is about education.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I forgot actually to say that I'm broadcasting from Portugal, from my home, which is in the surroundings of Porto. Porto is the Portugal's second largest city. Where are you broadcasting from, Janice?
I'm actually in the Netherlands now. It's been more pleasant during the lockdown than Luxembourg or Paris, because I'm right next door to a forest. I have a garden, and it's much more comfortable. So, but usually I'm in Luxembourg, a beautiful city if you don't know it.
Yeah, I've been into Luxembourg City and I've loved it. But that was on my early 20s, I believe. But I asked you this question also to let people know that they are free to let us know where they're watching us from, and to leave their comments either on Facebook, because we're broadcasting to Facebook, or on YouTube. We're also broadcasting to YouTube, and to Periscope, which is Twitter, basically. I know that you have prepared a presentation for us, and I have to thank you for it. And so the floor is yours. Feel free to set the pace. I'll interrupt you if there are any questions or if I have any.
Super. I'll go ahead, because it seems that your broadcast stops from time to time. So I'm going to talk about resilience, empathy, self-esteem, and I'm also talking from the youth perspective. I run an organization called I.S.C.T.E. We actually sit on the board of Facebook and of Twitter. We're very much into technology, trying to find that insight that will help us help parents help children more. I'm unable to click my slide.
Yes, on the bottom left corner, you have arrows. You can move them from forward or backwards.
No, they don't work. So please click. Can you click my slides for me?
Can you try arrows? Downwards.
I'm trying the arrows.
Forward.
Yes.
Okay.
They're simply not working. Perhaps we can put it
then
in another mode.
Yeah, exactly.
It's up to you. You've got it on your screen. Stop screen. Okay.
No. Yep.
I'll try it again. Sorry about that, people.
Okay. Now, this is technology. Technology, sometimes those things happen. I got it here, and I'm going to bring it to the screen. And there you have it. It's already on cyberbullying. I'm seeing cyberbullying at the global level.
Exactly, because I think this is very interesting to look at it at the global level. Look at that country that's red. This is really unexpected. This is where really cyberbullying is at its worst. Look at the countries in orange. There are big problems with cyberbullying. So we actually see Australia, for example, is in the middle. Europe is even better. But there are some countries where there's a lot of cyberbullying. There are other countries where there is a lot less cyberbullying. And this has led me really to look at the education systems, to see the similarities. One thing I do see is in the countries where there is legislation against cyberbullying, perhaps it's there because these countries were worse with cyberbullying, but it doesn't seem to have had an impact. They remain the worst.
Yeah, that's the case of Brazil, for instance. We've had some guests from Brazil. They have a national plan to eradicate or to tackle bullying and cyberbullying. They have legislation criminalizing it, and yet they are in the red. But Sweden comes as a surprise to me.
Yes, but these are 2018 to 2020 statistics. Can you click the next slide, please?
Okay. No, for me to do it, I need to share it. So
you share.
We'll stop your sharing and I'll share it. Is that okay with you?
Okay, I'm so sorry, the public. What I'm going to show you now is actually why is it so important to tackle bullying? Only one person, Dr. Olworth, seems to have really, Norwegian, seems to have really done a long-term research over several decades. And what has he found? Children who are bullied, and we include cyberbullying in this, although several decades ago it didn't exist. Children who are bullied, in fact, suffer all their life. Children who are bullied and children who bully. And there is really very little difference in the outcome. They will suffer from health. They will suffer because they will have more illegal behavior, wealth, and socially. All of these elements are affected by bullying. Next slide, please.
Yes. Just a sec.
So there is also another thing. Children who bully at school and who don't, here we go. 60% of those who bullied between grade 6, that is when they're about 12 years old, and or 9, when they're 15, have at least one criminal conviction by age 24. So I think that's a huge reason to tackle this at its root. 35 to 40% of these had 3 or more convictions as compared to groups of non-bullying boys. So that's why I think it's so important. Next slide, please.
Yeah, this is a really wake-up call. I mean, 60% of those who bully in the grade 6 or 4 will have a criminal conviction. That's a really a powerful indicator, and we should really pay attention to this.
It's true, but of course, bullying is only a symptom. There are many other elements that enter into it. I very much like this definition. Australia is quite an interesting country because there is a Commissioner of Internet Safety, Julie Imam-Grant. She's doing a lot of things, but because there is a national commissioner, it's run by the government. They work closely with NGOs and have research at their fingertips. And look at the different types of bullying. There's physical bullying that we all know, hitting, kicking, tripping, all those other things, damaging property. Then there is, of course, verbal bullying, which is equally hurtful, and it's the sort of bullying that I told you I was a perpetrator of without realizing it. Then we have social bullying or covert bullying. It's not really that visible, but it's about rumors, spreading rumors, doing negative facial or gestures behind the person's back. Contemptuous or menacing looks that really intimidate, humiliate the person, playing nasty jokes on them, mimicking, exclusion, which we know for young people, this is a really, really hurtful way of social bullying, and damaging someone's social reputation or social acceptance. And then we have cyberbullying. And cyberbullying is pretty much all of these things. It often starts with physical bullying, but it covers all of those areas of social bullying. It covers verbal bullying. And the reason why I like to look at this, my experience in schools has been, if you really break this down, analyze it as you would a scientific subject, children are much more interested. They don't feel like you're pointing the finger. I think it's a great way to start talking about bullying at school. I think you can skip the next slide. Did you have any comments on that? Have you seen this before, Tito?
Yes,
yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, we include another category, but it can also be on social bullying, which is sexual bullying. But one thing that a comment that comes to mind is yesterday it was celebrated on the 20th of October, the Bullying Prevention Day, and Portuguese police launched a video and a campaign alerting that bullying is a crime. And this slide shows that not all bullying is a crime. So we cannot look at it only by bullying, for instance. Most of the times is very damaging, but it's not a crime. Excluding someone is not a crime. So we cannot only see it through a criminal perspective. Shall I move to the next slide?
Jump a slide and move to the next, please. I just went further into cyberbullying. If you wish, because here's a list of cyberbullying, but I think you're pretty much aware of it now, and you will be making the slides available. So unless there's something that really interests you there, let's move on. And you do see that we include sexting, we include circulating sexually suggestive pictures, but we actually put this under cyberbullying. Now, where do they report that bullying happened? I had a very interesting experience in Seychelles a couple of years back, where we actually got children to write on post-its where they were getting bullying. And what did we discover? In the classroom, in the bus. And we see the same here. 82% at school. Then 32.5 on the bus on the way from school for those who actually get transport to school. Social media sites and apps. This is one of the first one. a physical location outside of school. Text messages, yes. Through online video games. And I've heard that this is a really bad place for kids. And this is one of the impacts of COVID. Kids are playing more games. Kids are going to more risky places. They're using social media much more. And what happened? Cyber criminality has risen. Also through phone calls, but it's much less common because anonymity is the greatest tool, I think, of cyberbullying. And of course, there are children who won't say where because it's happening everywhere. Next, please. I always put my source at the bottom of the slide because I think you're aware that there is so little research done in Europe that you really need to look everywhere to find figures. Now, I find this interesting. 47.7% of children aged 6 to 10 have apparently been bullied in one way or another. And this is a technical site called Comparitech. 11 to 13-year-olds, it goes up again, but not so much, 56.4%. Teens, 14 to 18, really the worst period. And then it drops back down. So this shows us who we should be talking to when we're trying to cut out bullying. Well, who should we be talking to? Everyone, but especially parents, because they're the ones behind these 6 to 10-year-olds. Next slide, please. The reasons for cyberbullying, and this is quite unique, this slide, I think. Appearance. Isn't that scary? 81% is because of appearance. Academic achievement. Many children with special needs are abused, and they're abused because their academic achievement isn't up alongside the others. They often don't do the same things as the others, but it really is perturbing. Race, 17%. Sexuality, and the LGBT community is very hard hit here. Financial status, you know how important it is for all children to have the latest in bags, in shoes, all the rest. Religion. And finally, there are other reasons that we're not going into tonight. What do you think of that? Does this correspond pretty much to your figures? Yes?
Yeah, actually, yesterday it was released a report in Portugal saying that 60% of the children who are obese suffer bullying and cyberbullying. So funny enough, it's nothing funny, but coincidentally it connects with the numbers that you are providing. So appearance is a mark for victims.
Yeah, it's sad. Let's look at the next slide. And I'm sorry about this. We did practice, but it's just not working. So what do we know about cyberbullying? Well,
no worry about that.
It often begins in a face-to-face situation. And cyberbullying and bullying can be promoted by poorly tested campaigns. And this is research that came out in 2012. Copycat behavior, giving kids ideas. There is an awareness cycle, and the awareness cycle should be respected. We begin by evaluating our target public. What do we need to show them? What do they want to hear? How can we marry the two? Next, we design our campaign. But our campaign must have 2 points. It must have a call for action, and it must have advocacy. I think you probably know about metacognition. If we try to teach someone something, we suddenly see the light. we realize what it really means. So a good campaign should always have advocacy and a call for action, then evaluation. But how many campaigns are really evaluated? How many researchers, how many awareness raisers really understand the side effects of what they're doing? When facing bullying issues, children and teens usually talk to their peers. They often hide it from adults. And this is why we work so much with young people, because they have to know how to handle the confidences that they get from other young people. When should they go to an adult? What should they do about it? That's really interesting to see that it's very similar to Plano B's research. 38.
Yep, that was a report that was launched, also announced yesterday. The report isn't launched, but the final results were announced yesterday, and they are in line, as Inês is pointing out.
It's great to see that we are in line, because if we can't always agree on the baseline, how can we move forward? So 38% of young people who admit that, only 38% of young people who are cyberbullied actually admit it to their parents, because they say it only makes things worse. 3 out of 4 teens have said they've been mean online. And in the USA, but remember, it's one of the worst for cyberbullying, 42% of LGBT youth have experienced cyberbullying. 21% of girls with a different skin color. Next slide, please. So
just comment on the previous one, because as Inês was pointing out, the results that came yesterday was that many parents, when their children tell them that they are being bullied or cyberbullied, they answer back in the same way. So if they hit you in one cheek, don't offer the other cheek, just hit them back. And that reminded me, and I mentioned it yesterday, a saying by Gandhi that said, "An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and we'll all end up blind and toothless."
Well done. Well, I call this empathy. And if you look at the next slide, this is one of my big concerns, empathy. How do children develop it? Well, there has been some talk about mirror neurons. And in fact, children, when they're being fed by their parents at the earliest age, when they're doing face-to-face connection, they learn to mirror the sentiments. They start to understand how the parent's feeling and start, because of these mirror neurons, and they can also express the same feelings. But what do I see everywhere? Look at this photo taken in Laos. A little kid there playing. He must only be 18 months old, 2 years old. Everyone's got their back turned to him. And this is pretty much what's happening nowadays. Much less face-to-face social interaction. And therefore, in Enable, we discovered that between 40 and 57% of 11 to 14-year-olds have difficulty defining negative emotions. And 25% show no helping behavior and really don't understand why they should. Life balance is another issue. Teachers are going crazy because children are arriving at school at 4 and 5. They don't know how to do up their shoelaces. They don't know how to feed themselves. They have skipped so many developmental phases. This is why we are achieving less at school, because we're being slowed down by all of this technology. Sleep is perturbed. The blue light. And we all know how grumpy a child will get if sleep is perturbed. And also another cause for concern, neuroplasticity. Kids see so many fast-moving sounds and images that we are using the 2 lateral lobes. The prefrontal lobe is getting underused, underdeveloped. And in fact, there is where we understand the consequences of our actions. We can formulate a hypothesis and understand what it might bring. And for me, these are three of the very big reasons why we have cyberbullying. Maybe it explains the differences between countries, but this is where we have to work. Next slide, please.
We have a question here from Bill, you still relating to the appearance issue. Cyberbullying by appearance is transporting it to cyberspace in the real world. After all, virtual is not so different from reality, is it?
And you're exactly right. Because I'm in Facebook's safety advisory board, I have the great privilege of actually getting a glimpse of what's coming on the horizon. So experts like myself can actually think about it and make suggestions. Safety by design, we could say. But when we move into virtual reality, we can do all the things that we can do in real life. So I think we can't separate them. And this is why I'm talking about bullying pretty much in general. Thanks, Bill, for your comment. Next slide.
Another comment that I would like to make. You mentioned the issue of bullying, cyberbullying in video games. Tonight at 9:30 Portuguese time, we'll have João Faria, who will also be focusing specifically on that issue. We have a comment by Eduarda saying, Portugal 2019, the police received 1,898 complaints of bullying in the school environment. 1,285 related to bodily harm, and the remaining 613 were related to injuries and threats. So this is just some the data on Portugal. The next slide, reasons for success and failure of anti-bullying actions.
And just to go back to Eduardo's comment, I would be surprised if such a large percentage, I have no doubts, but why is such a large percentage related to bodily harm? Well, I think the answer is because it's very hard to prove other types of bullying. It's hard to prove that you've been excluded or that someone's called you names. And this is a very big problem for kids, not being able to prove it, therefore they can't complain. But thank you for the comment. So why?
And another thing, Janice, 613 were related to injuries. Well, injury is a bodily harm.
Bodily harm.
So
yeah,
there must be, yeah. So sometimes these figures, because for instance, did you know that until recently, schools could not report cyberbullying because in the reporting form for the Ministry of Education, there was not a checkbox for cyberbullying. So there were no cyberbullying. So sometimes these statistics have to be taken with a grain of salt.
Exactly. And I'm going to speak afterwards about a good practice that I've seen in that regard. Look at why campaigns fail, why anti-bullying actions fail. Well, first of all, the lack of community awareness. And we know that a child is just part of the whole context. And it's the whole context which is shaping the values, which is shaping the attitudes. A lack of knowledge, certainly a lack of research. These together make almost half. Lack of pedagogical resources. Now, I think the situation's getting better. This is 2 years old, but we still have a lot to do. Organizational support. And this is the best practice I was going to speak about. In Seychelles, they have a wonderful anti-bullying policy where children know exactly what the punishment will be for any form of infringement. One of the big things in schools is that children do something, but no one ever told them what the punishment was. And it almost seems like it's up to the principal or the teacher. Spell it out. Make sure that every child then reads it and signs the school policy. And that way they're discovering that children are much more hesitant when they're going to do something against the policy. Definition of key concepts. This is always a problem. And that's why I began with these definitions. And if children understood these definitions and knew they could report them, I'm sure the figures that Eduardo showed us would be quite different next year. Legal aspects, big question. Some countries have laws, other countries don't. So let's look at what this holistic approach is. Yes, go forward. What approach am I proposing? Next slide, please. There we have the child with his individual characteristics. And he grows up in a family. So first of all, it's the family, the microsystem that has a very big impact on him. Then he goes to school, and little by little, his world opens up. The school climate and policy will then have quite a big effect once they move up through the classes in school. And finally, the economic conditions and the culture have a big impact. We know that poverty, we know that big wealth differences, that's not the right word, but large gaps between the wealthiest and the people living in poverty is one of the causes of this. So we really do have to do something at the government level, then at the school level, but generally over the whole country. Then we have to do what we're trying to show at the Council of Europe. Next slide, please.
We have a question from Ines. She's asking, do you see punishment as a good measure to decrease bullying?
Okay, when I talk about punishment, I mean that if you are found being rude to somebody else, then you know that you have to apologize to that person in front of the teacher, and maybe you have to go and help another child during your lunch break. So in fact, it's a formative punishment that I'm proposing. No, very often what we see, a child who is a bully, has been bullied at home, is emotionally insecure, and we're not adding another layer of punishment to what the child perhaps has already gone through. So punishment per se, no. Formative correction, perhaps is a better word, but it needs to be very carefully thought out. We don't want kids to behave because we praise them or we punish them. We want it to come from within. If we look here, there are 3 categories of approaches. And in fact, what you're going to do is click 3 times because I'm moving the blocks. So first of all, there are prevention campaigns with call to action and advocacy, I hope. Then we have mediation strategies to resolve conflict. The children do this themselves. And then social emotional competence development. But this is where it must start. This is the basis. Help children understand what are the socio-emotional competences. How do they develop resilience? How do they develop their citizenship skills? And one of them is conflict resolution. And finally, they have the capacity to advocate correctly, to pick up the action and make something worthwhile of it. And I think there are 3 things around it: resilience, literacy, knowing how to use these tools, how to block, how to report, which tools are suitable, how they can be misunderstood, and then citizenship. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is resilience?
What is resilience?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what is
Okay.
it? It's actually built on 5 pillars. And we need to be aware as teachers, as parents, of these 5 pillars. 1, self-awareness, that the child is fully aware of who he is, how he acts, how he could act differently. Mindfulness, not reacting, but rather thinking and then taking the initiative to act. Self-esteem, so important. Even if a child is bullied about their appearance, if they have enough self-esteem, then they are not going to be as badly hurt by resilience. Next, we have positive relationships. It begins in the family once again. And a sense of purpose. If a child really has a sense of purpose, what he wants to do in life, where he wants to go, he will be much better off, he or she. Next slide, please. This is what we're doing at the Council of Europe. Yes. Next slide. Thank you. We've created a brochure. You can find this brochure on the Council of Europe site, coe.int/DCE. And in the brochure, we show the values and the attitudes that we should be developing at home, because all of this starts with values and attitudes. Valuing human dignity, valuing the rights of each person in the family, responsibility, respect, being able to listen, observe, show empathy, cooperation, and knowledge and critical understanding begins by understanding myself. The next phase, which should begin after 5 years, but some children get there already at 3 years old. Yes, please. Next slide. Click. Tito, next slide.
Yes.
Thank you.
Continuing at school with peers.
Continuing at school, exactly, with peers and through media. So what comes next? Well, they know how to value human dignity, human rights. The next step is valuing cultural diversity, because a child who values cultural diversity will see the big advantage of having all sorts of different people at school. It's self-efficacy, it's tolerance of ambiguity, which often pushes children into being mean to others. It's also knowledge and critical understanding of language and communication, especially with cyberbullying when we hurt each other. And it's being flexible, adaptable, understanding linguistics, semantics, how I hurt someone, communicating well, and learning autonomously. We are not going to make it. We're not going to thrive if we're not an autonomous learner in today's society. Next slide, please.
We have a question here. Paula, actually, is a comment from Paula Costa. She's saying, but sometimes the family can't help the children to be a good family. So that's why we need school, right, Janice?
Exactly. This is one of the whole purposes of school. And this is one of the tragedies of what we've gone through with confinement. Yes. Some families don't know how to do it, but there are some very simple tools, and I will be so happy because kids all watch cartoons online. When are we going to start doing some really great cartoons to help them develop these values, these attitudes? But yes, in France, children go to school at age 3.5. Why? Because we realize that not all parents are able to help the child. So the sooner they get into an environment where they can be helped, the better. At the Council of Europe, we've also tried to analyze all the domains when young people are using technology, because that way we can look at all of the things that can cause them to harm others. For example, being online means inclusion. access and inclusion, helping others always to feel part of what we're doing, learning and creativity, and information literacy. Then, when a child has mastered being online successfully, he's ready to go on to well-being online, which is ethics and empathy. It's health and well-being. And there are so many ways that health is wrapped up with well-being. And finally, identity online, how we present ourselves, who we are. Finally, we get to rights online, rights and responsibilities, of course, security, safety, so important. I'm sorry, I can't even read that. And you'll be surprised with the last one, consumer
awareness.
Yes, because when we talk to children, even very young ones, 3.5, 4 years old, about consumer awareness, where the product came from, who might have made it, the sort of life that person may have lived, but also why I've got, I don't know, Nike, Adidas, and someone else hasn't. It's very important. Next slide, please. So,
learning from COVID.
Yes, learning from COVID. We did a survey, and in fact, in all, we got 21,042 responses. But as you can imagine, when we got down to question 10, there were a few less responses. I spend time online with my children too, and this is a real opener because some parents don't do any of these things, and yet where are children going to learn to be online successfully? Many watch videos, as I've already mentioned, listen to music. Something we discovered during the COVID also, a teachers' college in Germany asked where children went for their information to help their studies. Guess the most used site. The most used site is, in fact, YouTube. That's where kids are going. Next slide, please. And yes, YouTube. And that's where they think that they're learning, but in fact, they're only learning from influencers of their own age. And we see here a little one who wants to be part of the show. Go to Opa. I speak to my children about, what do they speak about? Well, a lot of them speak about bullying, but when we dug a little deeper, we discovered something very interesting. Parents speak to children about these topics, but they cannot tell us the strategies that they tell their children to use. So they're just speaking about bullying, but they're not saying, this is the way you can handle it. This is what you can do. It's the same thing with privacy. It's the same thing with everything. And this is a big notice for all awareness raisers. Stop talking about the topics and start talking about the strategies. Next slide, please. My children talk to me about what they're doing online. Look at those not reallys. Now, when we analyzed this, we found that many of those parents were actually parents of children under the age of 6. And this is really, how can a child under the age of 6 not be talking to their parents about what they're doing? You can look at these slides further. They are now on the Council of Europe website. Next slide, please. So, focusing on strategies, what is my call to action? Well, share internet experiences with children from their earliest age. Get to know your children's friends. Discuss their online activities. Set the ground rules, how they communicate, when they ignore others. They should also know that you never share anything online that you don't want to make public, and how much cyberbullying would be avoided if only we knew this. Check out apps before allowing your children to use them. Make sure you understand how to block and report. Tech time out is also important for the whole family. You need moments when you discuss other things. Children shouldn't take their mobile to bed with them. It's when we hear that a lot of bullying goes on, children are upset, not sleeping properly. And practice what you preach. And how many of us really do that? Next slide, please.
Fostering change.
Fostering change. How do you foster change? Well, this comes from UNESCO. 1, you need policies. 2, you need to train teachers. 3, you need to show them new pedagogical approaches. 4, curriculum. Why aren't these things in the curriculum? School, after all, is supposed to teach children to socialize, to be themselves, to live together. So why aren't these things in the curriculum? Assessment. We must continually assess children to understand where the problems are, where maybe they're being bullied. Assess the curriculum, assess the school. Okay, I'm not sure why I have the KT there.
I.C.T.
I.C.T. Thank you.
I.C.T.
Technology.
Yeah.
When you learn that there are 18 children per one computer in primary school, on average across Europe, it's quite disastrous. 11 children per one computer in lower secondary school. How are we going to teach our children contemporary literacy if they don't have the right tools? And lastly, school organization. Children need to learn in many different ways, and the school needs to be adapted to this. We all discovered this when school went online. So let's hope that we'll have a change in the near future. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to show you a couple of resources that I suggest that you take out. What can we do at the school level? Well, we have to make schools parent-friendly. We have to be much more innovative. Poland, for example, every year does an internet safety picnic, and people meet out in the field and they take their picnic basket and they play games. It's a family day. It's fantastic. School policy is important. Kids need to know what's allowed, and the infringement policy, the mindset, the lack of tolerance, the lack of cooperation. This needs to be changed at the school level. A classroom should go way beyond its own walls. We need more positive approaches to learning and to children in general. Improve information, education related to parenting and to bullying issues. Parents often have difficulty finding what they want. The whole school approach for me counts, especially when there are actions led by the pupils. And another reason why things aren't going as well as they could be is because in general, parents have a total lack, and teachers, a lack in the effectiveness of programs that are introduced. Why do we always talk about the failures? Let's start talking about the successes. Yes, next slide. Now I'm showing you, I think, some resources that I think will really help you. We've just written, and in fact, once again, this is young people who wrote it. We run an organization called the European Council for Digital Good, 18 young people from 9 different countries, aged 14 to 22. They worked together and they actually created all of the ideas in this book, which is now available online for 9 to 12-year-olds, where you can read take them right through this path to develop their digital citizenship skills. Next slide, please. Two other useful...
And I'm sharing the link in the control on Facebook. Can just click on the link and have access to the DigiTown.
Great, thank you. You can also do it through Insight. Take a look at Insight, see who we are, and when you find the Youth Council, you can just click on All Aboard for DigiTown. Bullying your child is in fact 4 years old, but I think it's extremely useful. For example, as you can see, how can I tell if my child's involved in bullying? And we actually give hints, give ways, a sort of a checklist where you can figure out, yes, he's very quiet, he's not eating well. When I go into his bedroom, he's looking at his mobile again. And that way, parents can be alerted. This is a 12-page leaflet. I really do advise you to download this. I think it will be very useful for you and show you also what you can do, the type of activities you can do. This is always the cry of parents. You tell us what we should do, spell out the activities that we should do to actually achieve this. So in Easy Steps, we do this from the Council of Europe and in this document. That's all that I have for you this evening, but I do hope that you have some questions for me. I'd like to hear your thoughts, and it's been really great seeing questions. Benjamin Franklin, can't go beyond him. Children are great imitators, so let's give them something great to imitate. How do you feel when your child watches you at the table with your mobile phone, and yet you tell him not to have the mobile phone at the table? Let's all be role models.
Janice, thanks a lot for this good present and resources that you have provided. I'm sure people are clicking and looking at them. We usually end with a request so that the guest can give us some tips or recommendations. But before that, let's see if we have any questions from the audience. Feel free to post them on comments or either on Facebook or YouTube. Paulo Costa is thanking you so much for both of you, Janice and Tito. We thank you, Paulo, for being there following this presentation. And anybody that has any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll be asking for you a final tip and recommendations in a minute. Give me just a minute or two to let our viewers know what sessions we'll be having until the end of the week. And then tonight at 9:30 p.m. We'll have talking with us about playing with the life of others, cyberbullying in video games. And then tomorrow we'll have Julia Vinhas, also from Portugal, talking about conversations with witnesses of aggression to give value to. So basically is the view of the bystanders, testimonials from bystanders. And on Friday, we'll end the week with Raquel Antonio, has conducted a research during confinement, cyberbullying in Portugal during the COVID-19 pandemic. That will be Friday at 6 p.m. I see that either comments or questions. Let me check. Clara Freitas Sampaio is saying thanks. Abílio Carvalho is also saying excellent presentation to know the numbers of cyberbullying. So if anybody in the audience has any additional questions for Janice, leave them in comments and I'll bring them to the squad. Janice, give us a final tip, advice, or recommendation. Our audience is mostly comprised of parents, teachers, and people who work with children at risk. So feel free to give some advice, either for three of them or just for one of them.
So I would say it would be pretty much the same for all of them. I think children are a treasure. You know that Jacques Delors wrote a book called Education, a Treasure Within. And I really think that the two go together. Children learn so fast when they're young that we have to make the most of this time so that they have a real opportunity to start on the right foot, to be able to continue absorbing all of the information, to continue evaluating. And if we can really achieve that, think of all the health problems we'll overcome, the poverty problems that we'll overcome. I think education is the answer. And I read once on a door in Sri Lanka, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And I think that's a very interesting quotation.
Absolutely. And I think that we couldn't end on a better note than that quote. If you can repeat it again, I think it will make a great ending line for this conversation.
So if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Janice, thank you for this wonderful presentation, for accepting to be part of this, and for giving us an hour of your time, plus the time that we took testing, as we always do with our guests. It was a pleasure to see you again. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll be able to meet again in person sometime in the future, hopefully not in the very long future.
And
Bye, and thank you very much.
Wishing that everyone stays safe and that we soon come out of this pandemic. Thank you, Tito. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Just to end here with a note regarding our sponsors. Word for Google, the gold sponsor for this event. You all know Google probably use their services, either email, search, or for storing their files, and also for thanking .pt, which is the domain name extension for Portugal, and is run in Portugal by an association that manage the DNS domain name system for Portugal. So we'll be back at 9:30 p.m. Portuguese time to talk with João Faria about cyberbullying in video games. See you then.